Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Former feds struggling to translate their government work for today's job market have a new tool in their toolbox. FedsForward is launching today an AI-powered platform built to help civil servants find values-driven roles in other sectors. Created entirely by volunteers, it's the result of deep conversations with federal workers about what they need to thrive outside government. Karen Lee, the co-founder of FedsForward, returns to the show to share more about the tool and how it can help. Karen, it's great to have you back.
Thank you so much, Terry, for having me.
When you were last on the show, the Trump administration had really just begun its push to reduce the federal workforce. What's changed since then? What are you hearing from the former feds you're talking to?
So as we've gone through the past couple months, Terry, there's been some consistency and some changes. The consistency has been across federal employees, those who are separating or will be separating, some of the same questions. What's out there after a federal career? How do I translate my skills? What's my value? What are the next steps tactically to get there? Those are the same consistent questions that we keep on hearing. I think what's changed, honestly, has been with passage of time for those individuals who have been separated from government even longer. There is an evolving set of questions that's emerging, which is, as I move through this process, I really don't know exactly what my value is as it relates to public service. And so we're hearing some deeper questions, really internally motivated, of what you do after what's felt a public service career where there's a belief that it's over. And some of those deeper questions really get to the heart of someone's identity. What we've seen emerge is this a little bit of an awakening that our public service careers are a deep core of our identity in a way that we as a federal community have never thought about that because it's always been consistent. And now for some of us where it's just not part of our lives anymore, this federal employment piece, there's a question of whether or not our public service is over. And that's where, from a FedsForward perspective, we really want to build this community of understanding that, in fact, no, your public service isn't done. In fact, there is an opportunity to extend it. And so I think one of the changes has been just this recognition that our work in government has been deeper than just a job.
When you think about the core of the identity, it sounds very similar to finding meaning after retirement. But these are folks who want to go back to work. They may have not navigated the job search process in 20 years. What are they finding really challenging about the whole process?
One of the most challenging things is honestly not being able to clearly articulate in very concise bullets, as seems to be required. What specific skills do you bring based on the specific activities that you've done with outcomes aligned to it? The reason why that's so challenging, especially for those of us in the civil service, is that's not how we think about our jobs. We don't go into work to accomplish tactical, specific things and then go home. It's a totality of efforts throughout a day, week, months, years to achieve an outcome. And so what's been most challenging, honestly, is to take what on the outside seems like a job and an easy ask, tell me what you did and how you did it. What skills do you bring to the table? When in fact, for many of us, almost, I will say, like pursuing an outcome of anything that you so deeply love, where you don't think about every single little thing you've done, how you did it and why, it's tough to untangle that and explain it to somebody who may not have an understanding of the environment in which you lived.
Well, FedsForward is rolling out a brand new platform today that is designed to help, I think, fill some of those gaps. Tell us about it.
So taking all of the conversations we've had from literally hundreds of feds, one of the key themes has been skills translation and finding your value outside of government, where you can apply not only your skills and experience, but also your mission-focused orientation. Because for so many of us in the civil service, it's not just a job. It's not just a job. It is a next step in the mission and the purpose we want to bring. And so taking all of those conversations and doing some deep technical work, we've created a platform that has been trained specifically for civil servants using a large language model. And In essence, in its simplest form, what it does is take in from you your professional origin story, your background, everything you've done, but also why you did it, how you did it, what mistakes you may have had, what you learned from it, what you care about moving forward, and identify for you with specificity tuned to you what your skill sets are and what job trajectories might make sense for you outside of government. What's really amazing about this is that it leverages the power of technology to give you very precise insights where we can do it at scale for hundreds of thousands of people.
I'm speaking with Karen Lee. She's the co-founder of FedsForward and a former Fed herself. So Karen, you said that this is AI empowered. How does it actually work? How did you build it? Who'd you talk to find out what would work?
So we are so lucky because all of us are, FedsForward is powered by volunteers. And we have so many incredible volunteers, one of whom is a developer by trade, but also a former CEO who ran a company that did in some ways do this matching. And so what he did was really sit down with us, and he's been part of our team now for months. So we've been working together where he's taken all these insights and understandings of civil servants and literally manually trained a large language model just for this. It's the first of its kind. And working with feds to validate whether or not it works, we've been able to continue to tune it so that it precisely understands the federal experience, not only the jargon, but also relationships between agencies, meetings behind engagements on the Hill and why those things are important, to be able to translate into skills in a way that is understandable and applicable for other sectors.
So this is not a job board. People don't go here to get connected to a job like they might on Indeed or something else. But how does this tool interact with those kinds of other apps?
So we aren't yet there, but you're right. This is not a job board. And the reason why we want to start with this is because if you don't understand what value you bring and what skills you bring to a next area of work, and if you don't know where you might want to target on the outside, the job boards actually don't matter. They're not useful. You have no specific ability to target and identify which jobs are right for you. So this almost, Terry, is the precedent work, kind of the boot camp that you need to go through is what someone said to us, to really understand what you might want to focus on so that then you can go at it and go get it.
And so you have framed this as kind of a national opportunity right now. We have, at least at OPM's count, 300,000 former feds at this point, many of whom are highly qualified in very specific skill sets. What is the national opportunity, and how do you want both the former feds and employers to think about this?
Terry, you're exactly right. We have an extraordinary pool of highly talented individuals. And the opportunity in front of us is where, honestly, this country, we as a country have invested in this workforce. We have invested billions of dollars to curate such an extraordinarily talented group of people that the opportunity ahead of us is to then use those who are separating from government and apply those skill sets across the economy. There are so many places that can light up the use of experts across NIH, Department of Education, Small Business Administration, the list goes on, where we need a talented pool of people who not only understand and have deep subject matter expertise, but have also operated at the most sophisticated, highest levels, nationally or internationally. And so where this talent honestly has been a little hidden, employers outside the government may not have even known that this skill set is available. This is the time, honestly, to educate and show that there is an opportunity to bring that talent and make our economy flourish even more.
The labor market's pretty tough right now. Is this a way for feds to find what really differentiates them and communicate it effectively in a world where AI is reading your resume and not a person?
Yes, absolutely. Because we have not, I think, as a federal community, done a great job of being able to communicate that, one. And two, I think there's a historic categorization that outside employers have had of what Fed skills can be used for. And our perspective from FedsForward is that there are so many ways in which businesses, nonprofits, academic institutions, state and local governments can apply federal talent that is atraditional. One great example that came up is our colleagues at USAID and state, those who've worked on international development and democracy building, especially, in this example, worked in fraud election detection, could be folks who light it up in the startup community, looking at how we address mis and disinformation, right? And work in our local libraries to encourage different ways to research and validate information. And it's a slightly different application of the skill, but it's so applicable.
So for our listeners who want to get involved, whether they're former feds or employers or allies of both, where do they go and how do they connect with this new platform?
So they can go to FedsForward.org, FedsForward.org. When you go on that site, there will be a button where you can log in to the platform, and that will unlock for you the opportunity for you to get personalized insights about yourself based on what you provide in there and give you a very organized way to move through this journey of navigating the next step in our public service careers.
Karen Lee is the co-founder of FedsForward and a former Fed herself. Karen, thank you so much for the work that FedsForward is doing to support this community.
Thank you, Terry.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.
What makes a great leader in government? Christine Harada joins WEPA CEO Shane Canfield to reflect on her journey from aerospace engineering to the White House. In this episode, she shares lessons on public-private collaboration, leading with purpose, and why service, not power, should guide leadership.
Hello, and welcome to the Lessons in Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Today, I'm joined by Christine Harada, former Senior Advisor at the Office of Federal Procurement Policy within the Office of Management and Budget. Ms. Harada, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
You spent portions of your career working in both the public and the private sector. And from your experience, what makes leadership in the federal sector different than the private sector?
At the highest level, leadership in the public sector is very fundamentally at its core mission-driven. Right? The work is in the service of the public good, and the goals and the programs are frequently long-term, they're systemic, and they're incredibly complex. And success, isn't necessarily measured by quarterly earnings. We don't have that kind of drumbeat, but certainly more by the lasting impact that we have on Americans' lives. What's also unique about public sector is, in my view, the profound sense of history that you feel. And I think certainly I was very aware about the work that I was doing and how it builds on the efforts of those who came before me, and that future generations of leaders also depend on the decisions that were being made today. And that, for me, certainly provided a greater weight of responsibility.
That's a wonderful answer. And I was in the private sector for much of my career, and now WEPA is a nonprofit, and I really relate to what you said about being mission-driven rather than profit-driven. You've got a long-term view, and always at the core of it is serving others.
Yes.
Is there a moment that stands out to you from early in your career that influenced your leadership style later on?
I started out my career as an aerospace engineer, building satellites in airplanes. And when I first entered the workforce, my organization at the time had 120 people. We were a large company, 120 people, 4 women, and I was the only woman of color. I was also the youngest throughout the entire organization. And so, I remember having an experience when I was doing some engineering work. We had a design review, and I had seen some issues with the flight software that I pointed out. At the time, they're like, maybe it's not really that big of a concern. I was like, but in my heart, I knew that the issue was real and stayed with it. And sure enough, a few weeks later, that topic came up again, and we addressed it. Turns out my concern did indeed prove to be valid. And so it's just one of those experiences that really sank into me around ensuring that I am listening to everybody, period, end of story, within the organization. Really thinking through about how do we take into consideration opinions from all different spectra. As a third-generation Japanese American, right, I was raised to be humble, keep your head down, and work hard, etc. But at times, leadership also requires you to speak up, do so politely, with courage, etc. Even though you may be the only voice in your room, but certainly trust your voice. It also really helped shape my belief around diversity. DEI programs right now are viewed in a negative light. We're all mosaics, and they become better because you have those different experiences. And that's really stayed with me throughout the entirety of my career.
The diversity issue is a really big one coming from the insurance industry. That's an industry which is working on that. It's really a diversity of viewpoint and perspective and experiences that does influence your business, and more diverse employee bases absolutely helps. Was there a time in your federal career, perhaps when you were at OMB, that you faced what you consider a real challenge, and how did you overcome it?
One moment that really stands out in particular was when I was serving as the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer during the Obama administration. You know, we had set, like many administrations, had set some really ambitious goals, very, very, very ambitious goals around how do we think about making the federal government's operations much more sustainable. You know, but the challenge wasn't so much about the scale or the technical capacity of the organization. A lot of it was really centered around the funding. We overcame this largely by being very strategic, helping out with blocking and tackling with the variety of legal issues or legal questions that might have come up, like how do we address this? Certainly in the federal government, you're more often leading through influence as opposed to pure form authority, and that you really need to listen deeply, communicate clearly with folks, building out those coalitions and, you know, engaging with your stakeholders. And I know many folks in government speak like that, but that is the truth.
As someone who's spent time in both the federal and the private sectors, what makes the relationship between the two sectors important?
Certainly, you know, it's an absolutely essential partnership, and I would add on to that like nonprofits or philanthropic organizations. As I mentioned before, I'm Japanese American, and in Japan there's a symbol for thunder, which looks like 3 arrows pointing, you know, around each other in a circular pattern, kind of to represent the swirl, if you will, of clouds. And that's kind of how I view the relationship between the government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector. The government frequently sets the vision, the policy, the direction, but of course it's the private sector that brings the capital, the innovation, the skill set, the capabilities, et cetera, to be able to execute. Partnering with that, of course, are the nonprofits who may be supporting the surrounding society. Public-private collaboration is not just about contracts or compliance, but it's also about figuring out what's your shared purpose. That's when real transformation can and does actually happen.
In life insurance, there's a concept, lifetime value, where bringing a new insured in costs a lot more money than the amount of premium. And so when you talk to commercial carriers, it's a similar kind of thing. You need to bring them into the concept that they're going to be with us 20 years, and after 5 years, you can ride through that. But it's a concept that isn't easy for commercial businesses to understand. You know, that's a partnership too. Very, very similar. What advice would you give to somebody aspiring to become a leader in government?
There are 3 things, right? So firstly, around leadership in government, you want to make sure that you're leading with purpose. You want to stay grounded in your values, and don't underestimate the power of relationships. Remember why you entered public service in the first place, and that'll help carry you through some of the inevitable challenges that you're going to face. Making sure that you are also investing in relationships. In government, you rarely have full control, and I think this is, in my view, more important in government than perhaps in the private sector. You know, you are frequently leading through influence. You are collaborating with very different parties who frequently have very different agendas than you do. And so building that trust, investing in building that trust and planting those seeds earlier and along the way in your career, I think is absolutely critical. And certainly last but not least, I would say, you know, don't feel that you have to have it all figured out on day one. You know, absolutely stay open to the unexpected. Say yes to the opportunities that stretch you, and know that you can lead from wherever you are. It's not just about position or hierarchy. It's about the impact that you can have.
What wonderful advice, especially in today's world, which is a little topsy-turvy. Who is one person, someone you know personally or perhaps someone well-known, that's impacted your leadership style?
The leaders that particularly stand out for me are Colin Powell, a woman named Carla Harris, who was a managing director in investment banking, and then last but not least would be my father. Starting with perhaps the more famous one, Colin Powell. I read his biography, loved his perspectives and the rules of leadership that have been particularly influential for me, right? So get mad, then get over it. Share the credit. Perpetual optimism, a force multiplier, you know, things of that nature. And hearing his story was certainly very inspirational for me. And so I certainly very much look up to him and as a role model. The second person that I mentioned is a woman named Carla Harris. She's an African-American woman, became a managing director at an investment bank in the 80s, at a time when there were not that many women of color in investment banking in New York. And so she's published a book called Her Pearls of Wisdom. It's one of her trademarks. She always wore a pearl necklace, and she has pearls of wisdom around how can you be authentic and build relationships to be successful in super challenging environments. And she had a lot of guidance on the importance of finding sponsors and mentors. And certainly last but not least, my father is really my why for I do a lot of the work that I do in the public sector. He started out life like many other, immigrant kids in poverty. He was a strawberry farm laborer. Japanese Americans at the time were not allowed to own the land, so we worked the land. He grew up in that kind of environment. And I just think it's absolutely neat that someone who came really he was dirt poor, to say it, and his daughter ended up working in the White House twice. It's quite the American dream, and I would very much like to have that opportunity available for other people as well.
Well, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Christine, thank you very much for your time today and all of these learnings. It's really good, impactful. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I'm Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Until next time on Lessons in Leadership.
Find the full podcast and future episodes of Lessons in Leadership on the Federal News Network app and anywhere you enjoy your podcasts.